Former First Lady Jill Biden rolls out to hawk a new book and somehow makes the Bidens look even worse. California Democrats pass a law against the First Amendment while Maryland goes after the Second Amendment. And Beto with a Bible, James Talarico, gets some tough questions from an unsuspected source. It's Thursday, May 28th, and this is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Hi, and welcome in to Heartlander News. I'm Chris Stigall. Yesterday, the president and his cabinet met and made more public proclamations about the fraud that's been uncovered in government, headed by J.D. Vance. Sorry to sound like a broken record here, folks, but I believe that this issue is everything. Let's kick it off with some comments from the vice president yesterday.
Let me just recap for the benefit of our friends of the media. In just 2 months, we exposed billions of dollars in benefits that have been stolen from the American people. We referred over $22 billion in fraudulent small business loans back to the Treasury for collection. We deferred more than $1.3 billion in fraudulent Medicaid reimbursements that were coming from various states, particularly California. We put a 6-month hold on enrollments for new hospice and home health care providers because so many of the newer hospice providers were not actually providing hospice services, but were just focused on fraud. So we're going to cut that out for a little bit and try to get to a place where we can actually certify that the people providing hospice services are actually providing those very necessary and important services. We've recovered taxpayer funds from the $135 billion stolen after the floodgates were open in the immediate aftermath of COVID. We have found $6.3 billion in suspected fraudulent government contracts, which were mostly awarded during the last administration, and that has stopped. And finally, we blocked $60 million in student aid fraud that should have gone to young people trying to get an education, but instead we're going to fraudsters. And I think the theme here of the anti-fraud task force up to this point has really been that we're protecting two classes of victims here. We're protecting the American taxpayers who shouldn't have their money stolen by fraudsters. And of course, we're protecting the people who need these services. Fraud is not a victimless crime. This is not somebody gets to make some money for violating the law, and otherwise it's not a big deal. This is people who rely on critical services, students who rely on student loan services, sick people who rely on hospice care, a number of small businesses who rely on the availability of these loans so that they can grow their business and hire people. All of these people, all of our fellow Americans have been taken advantage by fraudsters, and the task force is here to stop.
So let me ask you a simple question. If somebody steals from Medicare, or steals from Medicaid, or steals from Social Security, or steals from any taxpayer-funded program meant to help seniors or veterans or disabled Americans or struggling families, should they get to keep that money? Well, of course not. That's common sense to normal people, but right now, that's basically what's happening. Every single year, the federal government loses between $175 and $300 billion. That's billion with a B, to fraud in those programs alone. And that's not pocket change. That's a whole culture of grift and stealing directly from the American people. Listen to EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, who talked about this very thing. Democrats like Stacey Abrams, billions out the door. The Biden administration rushed through this phony government agency known as the EPA.
Stacey Abrams was given $2 billion for an account that had $103 in it, an environmental fraud, I guess. And she had $103 in this newly opened account. And before leaving business, they put $2 billion into the account. And they had no reason for existence. They were unable to say what they did with it. $2 billion. Lee, do you want to just mention something about that?
Well, thanks to your leadership, Mr. President, that was canceled. And they no longer have access to that $2 billion.
They fought like hell. They wanted that money. Go ahead.
In fact, it was over $29 billion that it's now been canceled at EPA. You told us to make it a priority. This happened as soon as you came in. After the election, before your inauguration, they were caught on video saying that they were rushing to get billions of dollars out the door before you're swearing in because they were afraid that once you were sworn in, you were going to stop it. Well, that part, they were right.
We did. Yeah, we did. Great,
And
Jeff.
yeah, no, we're happy to do it, Mr. President. And, the Department of Justice under Todd Blanche's leadership, they just secured another big win in an appeals court on some recently canceled grants for different agencies. So great attorneys making sure that this accountability is delivered over the finish line. It's been a great team effort.
It's huge, of course, what we're seeing. This culture of grift and stealing directly from you, the American people. It was white hot during the Biden administration. Just one more to prove the point. It was discussed, remember the PPP loans during the COVID era? Billions flowing out the door in fraudulent payments during the Biden administration. Just one more on this discussion yesterday.
I'll tell you the other thing about fraud. Small businesses are particularly hurt by the fraud because they're some of our biggest taxpayers in the country. And they show up every day. They work hard to provide for their employees, to build their businesses. They're doing it the honest way. And they see fraudsters taking from the American people. It's taxpayer money. And so you think about, at the SBA, we found $200 billion in fraudulent PPP loans that the Biden administration tried to hide and forgive and sweep under the rug. We've turned the first $22 billion of that over to Treasury for collections and to DOJ for prosecution. Our Inspector General is already announcing that people are going to jail. There are jail sentences now being served. We've announced that 140,000 people have been barred from ever getting SBA loans again, defrauding the government for about $9 billion. So we are going to continue our work under the great leadership of Vice President Vance and appreciate the partnership because it's really accelerated our ability to get the job done.
And there you have it. That's just a fraction of the money that we know that's been stolen. Again, a culture of stealing directly from you, the American taxpayer. And what usually happens to people who steal this kind of money? You heard a little about it from the Small Business Administration lead there, Kelly Loeffler. They maybe serve a little bit of time. They pay back a tiny fraction of what they stole. They hide the rest in trusts or shell companies and family members' names, and then they walk right back into business like nothing happened. Sometimes they even end up getting to pocket that government money themselves and come right back for more. And that's not justice. And most Americans see it and know that. And I got to tell you something, I would love to see, if I'm just to be honest with you, I'd love to introduce something called the Fraud Doesn't Pay Act. If I were king, if I were a member of Congress, that's what I'd like to see. The Fraud Doesn't Pay Act. The core idea is simple. If you steal from the American taxpayer, that debt follows you for the rest of your life until every single dollar is paid back, every dime without exception. If you're a convicted fraudster, you'll repay every penny you stole, plus steep financial penalties on top. And if you try to hide assets through shell companies or fake transfers or trusts or relatives, the government will claw those assets back. No more legal loopholes, no more magic tricks. And if you're convicted of defrauding taxpayer programs, you are permanently banned from holding public office, working in government, receiving federal contracts of any kind, or benefiting from any federal program ever again. Why so harsh? Because public trust matters. If you steal from the American people, you should never get another chance to profit from the American people ever again. And here's something else I think the public is going to love about this idea. Victims get paid first. Before the government takes its cut, before the bureaucracies get theirs, the seniors, the veterans, the families who were actually harmed come first in line. A plan like this would be about meaningful consequences. For too long, white-collar fraud has been treated like a paperwork violation instead of what it truly is, theft from working Americans. When someone steals billions from Medicare or Medicaid, that money doesn't vanish into thin air. It comes out of your paycheck. It comes out of your taxes. It comes out of your grocery money and your rent and your medicine. If, again, I were king or a member of the legislature, I'd like to see something called the Fraud Doesn't Pay Act. And send a clear message. Fraud against the American people should never be a profitable endeavor. Not temporarily profitable, not eventually profitable, not ever should it be profitable. If Washington is serious about restoring trust, accountability, and fiscal sanity, I say this is where it begins. Let's make fraud hurt if it's exposed and caught. Let's make fraud expensive. Let's make sure fraud never pays. And I think the Trump administration is well on its way to finally executing some justice here on that front, and I'm glad to see it. Meanwhile, on that front, the New York Times reporting today that the FBI has arrested a CIA official with $40 million in gold bars in his home. I don't know what this gold bar thing is. I was just joking with somebody the other day that about Bob Menendez, the former New Jersey senator, who also had gold bars and like fur coats in his closet. I didn't realize this is like Daffy Duck stuff. I didn't know people were still collecting gold bars. But anyway, a senior CIA official was arrested last week after investigators found hundreds of gold bars worth over $40 million stashed in his Virginia residence, a small fortune he apparently brought home from work. Aaron, we don't have any gold bars in the back, do we? Just out of curiosity? You're not sitting on any, are you? At the town hall headquarters? I just want to be sure.
Not that I know
Okay,
of.
good. I don't know where this guy works, but I feel pretty confident no one at town hall has any gold bars. Nevertheless, David Rush being held in jail while he awaits a detention hearing in the coming days on charges of stealing public money by filling out fraudulent timesheets. The only charge lodged against Mr. Rush is that he inflated his academic credentials and obtained military leave pay worth tens of thousands of dollars. The authorities say he falsely claimed to be a member of the Navy Reserve when he was discharged. The court papers describe Mr. Rush as a former senior executive service-level employee at the United States government agency. In a joint statement, CIA, FBI said the arrest occurred on May 19th after the agency alerted the Bureau. After a CIA internal investigation identified potential violations of the law, the director, John Ratliff, referred the information to the FBI. From last November to March, the court papers say Mr. Rush asked for and received a significant quantity of foreign currency and tens of millions of dollars in gold bars for work-related expenses. When the CIA conducted a review of where the gold and currency were stashed, the agency was unable to locate the gold bars or significant amounts of the foreign currency. On May 18th, agents searched Mr. Rush's home and found approximately 303 gold bars, each of which weighed approximately 1 kilogram. Based on the price of gold, the affidavit said the estimated value of the gold exceeded $40 million. Investigators also seized nearly 3 dozen luxury watches, many of them Rolexes. The court papers don't indicate why Mr. Rush appears to have kept so much gold and $2 million in U.S. currency in his home, or what work project would have required him to amass such wealth. You see, it's stories like these. And again, this is just another example. When the American taxpayer hears about this and sees that the idea that there is someone inside the CIA, even though caught, and this is someone who was caught, that's the thing. When you hear a story like this about just some Joe Blow average guy who has somehow managed to use his government credentials to shelter and hoover up tens of millions of dollars in gold and tangible assets in his home and cash, $2 million in cash. This normal American taxpayers hear this stuff. It's shocking. And then people get really cynical and they say, well, if that's going on with this one guy, imagine how we're being ripped off. And part of what the Trump administration's been addressing, part of what you just heard in the clips I played, taxes are something that should be thought of as your property. And for too long, politicians of both sides talk about tax money, your dollars, your tax dollars as theirs. It is private property. It is the confiscation of your property. When you earn money, that is your property. And when government takes it, they are taking your property. And we have this social compact and trust and people inside government stealing it, fraudulently hoovering it up for themselves. It's a very, very frustrating thing. I hope we see real justice here on this front. I sincerely do. The midterms, we've been talking about this week. Of course, big upset in Texas, and President Trump, here's the headline from The Hill. They keep pounding him on this, and I guess it depends on what point of view you have about President Trump and the midterms when he says this sort of thing. I get it, personally, when President Trump says what The Hill thinks is an exceptional thing, quote, "I don't care about the midterms," says President Trump. "I don't care about the midterms." That's their takeaway quote. Now, let's get into the context of it. President Trump says he doesn't care about the midterms during his cabinet meeting on Wednesday. They thought they were going to outweight me, We'll outweight him. He's got the midterms, Trump told the reporters on Wednesday. What's he talking about? Iran. He's saying about the fact that Iran thinks rather than cooperate, open the Strait of Hormuz, come to the table and sign some sort of peace agreement, lay down their nuke ambitions. Trump knows, and I think China is the same way with tariffs. I think China is doing this on tariffs, and I think Iran is doing this on nukes. They think that because President Trump is doing stuff that is temporarily very uncomfortable for the American public, and it is. I know this. You know this. You know what you're paying. Again, I just paid another $130 to fill up my pickup truck yesterday. You talk to anybody who farms. The tariffs hurt. Gas prices and fertilizer costs hurt. It hurts. The American people are squeezed. Things are expensive. Everybody knows it. But the thing that I find is, it isn't like, and we're going to get to the Bidens in a little bit, it isn't like when things were going through the roof, gas prices were far higher than they are right now under Biden. There was no real reason for it. You and I couldn't put our finger on what the hell was even the deal. Why were gas prices so high? And what was he doing about it? Nothing. In fact, when you talk about things like Ukraine, it was as much as it takes, as long as it takes. There was no stated goal. Real enemies like China and Iran weren't being dealt with at all. Venezuela, Cuba, nothing. At least now, I think the American public, while we're not comfortable with it, I think we're willing to withstand some proverbial medicine taking to rejigger the global economy in a way that we can't be harmed and exploited again by people like China and Iran. But it's going to take a minute or two. And so when Trump says, "I don't care about the midterms," they thought they were going to outweight me. He's got the midterms coming up. He'll come to the table, or he'll bend. I'm not going to bend. He said, quote, "I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night. That was the prelude to the midterms," referring to that Texas runoff yesterday, or 2 days ago, between Paxton and Cornyn, and Paxton winning big. Trump says, people are with me here. I'm not worried about the midterms. People know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I found that to be true, just anecdotally, people that I talk to. It hurts. Nobody likes it, but everybody understands there's a purpose behind it. And Trump is communicating to the rest of the world and the despots who would try to take advantage of us and do us harm. He's saying, look, if you think you're going to outweigh me or outweight me because of the midterms coming politically, go ahead. I got all the time in the world. I'm not. And that's what I have to say I admire the most about this president. When people talk to me about tariffs, or they talk to me about high prices and the gas prices used to be here and now they're here, and if only we hadn't done what we'd done in Iran, gas prices wouldn't be this way. And I say, well, yeah, but you're talking about a fundamental restructuring of the global economy forever. A fundamental restructuring of really the power and the leverage that some real bad guys have had for decades in China and Iran. They're losing that leverage. And their last card to play is, let's see if Democrats take control of the Congress to stop President Trump's agenda entirely. They actually believe they can wait this out politically through to November. President Trump says, make my day. I admire that about the president. He is not doing what is politically expedient. I've said that on the show before, and I think it bears repeating. The president knows and was told, dealing with Iran this way, tackling China with tariffs this way, it's going to mean price hikes for the American consumer, and it's going to get uncomfortable politically. And I believe the president, taking the totality of all of the information, is so committed to the fundamental restructuring of the way things have been for decades. He said, I know it's going to hurt. I know it could be politically costly, but it's the right thing to do, and we're doing it. He has always pledged, for instance, that he was going to deal with Iran. He's been talking about Iran as a problem. He's been furious that Iran has been taking advantage of us and making us look like fools on the global stage since the 80s. I mean, there are famous interviews floating around out there from the 80s of Trump talking about Iran and how he would like to see them dealt with. He's doing it. Despite what might be politically unpopular, despite what might happen this fall, he's doing the hard stuff. And I, for one, am grateful to have someone in leadership who's actually decided to do hard things because they're necessary instead of doing politically expedient things because it makes everybody happy today, ignoring the long-term problems. It's hugely important. So when President Trump says, I don't care about the midterms, of course, he doesn't mean he doesn't care about winning. He wants to see the Republicans continue to win and do well, but he's not making decisions because of politics. He's making decisions for the best interest of the country in the long term. And to that end, the U.S. military conducting new strikes yesterday. This from the Wall Street Journal. U.S. forces conducted new military strikes against Iran yesterday after Tehran launched drones at commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. American forces shot down Iranian drones and hit a drone control station. A major port city is where it was located in southern Iran, located right there on the Strait of Hormuz. Iran fired 4 one-way attack drones at American and commercial ships earlier Wednesday, said officials who were briefing the press on this thing. And then F-A-18, F-16, and F-35 fighter jets shot down the drones. Then the F-18s hit the ground control unit before it could launch a 5th drone. As with the U.S. strikes earlier this week, administration officials characterized the attacks as limited and defensive in nature, not an escalation that would collapse the tenuous ceasefire the two sides mostly have been observing. There were no casualties during the incident. That is also another remarkable thing and bears repeating. We've lost, and 13 is too many, as the president says, but in all of this kinetic action, we've lost 13 of our brave service personnel. It is astounding, frankly, the devastating efficacy of the United States military and this action since Operation Epic Fury was launched. And for modern combat, it really is a remarkable thing to tally our losses. Again, precious, every soul precious, but to tally it to be only 13 in this kind of fighting, it's extraordinary. And by the way, it speaks to the future of warfare and, frankly, how dangerous, how much more perilous and dangerous somewhere like Iran can be without anybody being physically on the ground. And that again bears repeating. The Secretary of State Rubio has stressed this over and over again. If Iran was allowed to continue to develop nuclear weapons and rapidly build up their drone capabilities, there was no stopping them. None. So I commend this, and I know the president is foot on the gas pedal with it. He's not backing off a bit. The U.S. House is revealing a draft to a $1.1 trillion Pentagon funding bill. Besides the usual investments in munitions restocking, shipbuilding, military construction, nuclear infrastructure, and tech innovation research, this new bill enhances cybersecurity coordination with Israel. U.S. lawmakers have unveiled the draft of this $1.14 trillion annual defense bill. There's a markup now in committee, usual investments in all of that stuff that I just mentioned. It aligns with the White House's proposal to boost the Department of War funding by 43%. The White House requested a $1.5 trillion Pentagon budget for 2027, with roughly $1.1 trillion coming from this Defense Authorization Act. Listen, this is a president. Again, this is a White House that is committed. They've changed literally the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. They've changed the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of War. President Trump is requesting lots and lots and lots of money to be poured back into the United States military. Our recruitment numbers are through the roof. The military is strong and respected again. President Trump understands, as we've combed through all of this, strategically taking control of waterways to our north, off the coasts of Canada and in between Canada and Greenland, making sure Russia and China can't just be running through there willy-nilly, squeezing Venezuela, squeezing Cuba. We had Russian vessels. It was not too terribly long ago. In fact, in 2024, I talked to President Trump about this. He said, you're the only person to ask me about that. And It's true. No one has or really has since asked President Trump or talked about the fact that Russian military subs were floating around off the coast of Cuba, not terribly far from Florida, unencumbered during the Biden administration, not to speak of the Chinese spy balloon. We were sitting ducks. We were in an incredibly weak position. And President Trump is trying to reset the table so that, one, we have a strong military, a Department of War, on war footing, as Pete Hegseth likes to say, the warrior ethos. It is a Department of War. We are combat ready. Mess with us, mess with the bull, you're going to get the horns. That's what the American people want. And folks, it is the preamble to the frickin' Constitution. 250 years we celebrate this great country of ours. And when they wrote the very first thing, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. Justice, domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense. It's right there. It's the top line item. All Americans believe we should have a strong national defense, not a weak one, which is why it was so difficult to watch that feeble old man. We were just talking, Aaron and I were talking about this before the show started today. He said he really wasn't working in political media at the time. And he said, so I really didn't listen to a lot of what people were saying back then. He had another job. I didn't listen to a lot of people talking about Biden back then. I said, for me, it was frustrating as a commentator to sit and watch a guy that you knew wasn't running anything. It drove me crazy week after week as a talk show host to sit and watch a guy that I knew was not in charge. It was obvious. We always mocked the fact that Matlock was on the pudding cup, the Afghan over the lap, while other people were making decisions. The auto pen. President Trump highlights the fact that last administration was quite literally on autopilot. And then we ultimately saw it in the debate. And inexplicably, the former First Lady is back now. She's written a book. I'm sure that's going to sell like hotcakes. And Jill Biden says in an interview now about her husband's dismal performance versus President Trump, and you've seen the clip over and over, I'm sure by now, of him just wandering and meandering, and then President Trump finally looks at him and says, I have no idea what he just said, and I'm not sure he knows what he just said. It was always a laugh that Joe Biden was running anything. Even bigger laugh, Jill Biden says that was a one-off moment that the nation saw in that debate. Take a listen.
Were you horrified as you saw it unfold?
I wasn't horrified. I was frightened because I had never, ever seen Joe like that.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
Before or since? Never.
Or since?
Yes. Or
You've
since.
never seen him like
Never.
that?
No.
What happened?
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the... And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Why?
Oh, I do not miss that. It pained me to even revisit it. But it's a gift in a way. You have to admit that people like Jill Biden, it's almost a gift. It's an evil gift. But if you're able to look so convincingly someone in the eye and say, that's never happened before or since. And gosh, I was frightened. I thought he was having a stroke. And of course, we all know after that, we saw and you heard the clip there of her dragging her, what she thought, stroke patient husband out on a stage to scream, you answered every question. You did fantastic. Now, I don't know if you're married, and I don't know how your relationship is with your spouse, but I can speak on behalf of my wife. I've known her pretty well, 26 years. If my wife thought I was having a public stroke on a stage, I suspect, I'll have to call her and confirm after the show. I suspect my wife would say, honey, we're going to go to the emergency room right now. And if I said, but I got another 5 events to go to, she'd say, we're going to go to the hospital. We're going to need to cancel the rest of the day. What I just saw out of you is alarming. We're going to go have it looked at. So everyone else can wait. We're canceling the rest of the day. I don't think she'd parade me back out to another event and another event and another event. He did 4 events, I believe, that same night, I think, at least a couple. And again, that very public display right after the event. So she was frightened. She'd never seen it before or since. Well, of course, we know that was a lie. We know it's always been a lie. We know he was never running anything. And it's amazing the clarity of honesty now that Democrats have, now that that's in the rearview mirror and that entire fraud has been exposed. Chris Murphy, one of the most loathsome Democrat liars, I mean, who can stare you right in the face, stone cold lie to you with a smile. Again, it's a gift with these people. I've never seen anything quite like it. The gaslighting, the professional level, industrial strength gaslighting from Democrats, it's real, particularly when you talk about the Biden era. Listen to Chris Murphy now.
Well, I certainly remember that debate as we were all wondering what was happening in front of our eyes. I feel like we've litigated this. It was a mistake for the president to stay in that race as long as he did. We would have been better off as a party had he gotten out much sooner. But yes, that was certainly a moment where many of us were scratching our heads.
Many of us were scratching our heads. Now, all you have to do is a cursory search and go back and look at what Democrats were saying after that debate. And they flatly denied that there was any internal rigging that ultimately railroaded. I mean, we all know Nancy Pelosi and the powers that be. I maintain to this day that was a setup to get rid of him from the very beginning. And I think the power brokers inside here, I'll just say this. And again, I don't mean to relitigate it because maybe it's not important, but it is worth remembering who the Democrats are and what they did. And here's my belief: that entire episode of Joe Biden glitching out before the American people in a debate. Do you remember how that debate came to be? I happened to be, because at the time I was doing a fairly new show, and I was scheduled to take a trip to Alaska with a group of listeners. And the specific date for the departure from Alaska, from Seattle, was a date in June that had been set months prior. And I remember in the spring of 2024, it was announced that the Democrats were angling to move the debate forward. Now, you know that presidential debates traditionally only happen in the fall. We start talking about debates about a month before the election or whatever. But instead, the Democrats insisted, and Joe Biden cut that stupid video. Come on, man. I'm ready. I'll fight you anywhere, anytime. And that was back when they were making fun of President Trump being in court. And they were dragging him through all the court. I know. It's like traumatic stress bringing this up again. We lived through such hell with all of that. But remember, they were trying to tie President Trump's campaign up in courtrooms so he could only participate on the campaign trail for so many days a week. And that was when Biden made that stupid video about, I hear you're free on Wednesdays, because that was the only day he wasn't in a courtroom in New York and all that sham trial stuff. And Biden was cutting those videos that they had to keep editing and editing and editing. Now, Aaron's a guy who works on this show. Aaron, you know what it is to edit video. And what we learned during that episode is if you see a lot of quick edit cuts, jump cuts, as we call them, when somebody's recording a monologue, what does that mean?
It means it took a lot of cuts or takes to get that shot.
Yes. Did you ever happen to see that video that I'm talking about where Biden's challenging Trump?
I just recently reposted it on all of our channels.
All right. So you're a pro. What was your read on that back then?
It was not done well.
Yeah.
And it was very obvious that it was I mean, just like anything with Kamala, though, it took them a lot of time, a lot of takes to get anything out coherent.
Yeah. And so they make this video and, I'll take you on anytime, anywhere. Come on, pal. I hear you're free on Wednesdays. Ha, ha, ha. But the thing about the whole deal was, despite the fact we knew he was a mess, I kept saying, and no one was really even challenging it, I kept saying, why are we talking about moving the debates so early? What's going on? It wasn't a Trump proposal. It was Biden. Come on, let's go. Let's debate right now. I kept asking everyone, what are we doing? We have debates in October. And the reason I was so personally ticked off about it was because I had to go to Seattle. My show started on the East Coast at 6 a.m, and we were going to depart the morning after that debate got scheduled in June. So what does that mean? I couldn't not be on the air, and I had planned on being off the air to start the trip. So I had to fly to Seattle and do the show at what I think we started at, like, I don't know, I got up at like 1:30 to be in the studio to start. I was basically doing the show in the middle of the night so that we could be live the next morning covering that stupid debate. I'm sharing all that to tell you that was an extraordinary moment in history, presidential history, because we have not gone through something like that as a country that early. And it was on purpose. And who drove it? The Democrats. The Democrats pushed. I believe this to my last breath. I can't prove it, but I believe it. The Democrats knew Joe Biden was going to flame out. They knew what an embarrassing joke he was, and he didn't want to leave. I maintain the deal was always that Joe Biden was supposed to be the one-term guy. He was only supposed to be the guy that was going to restore normalcy after the first Trump term and then get out of the way, and we're going to insert Kamala Harris. That was always the game plan. And then Biden said, hey, you know what? I don't want to go anywhere. And Jill Biden, who we know loves the spotlight because she's just written another stupid book nobody's going to buy and doing this performative, I was so worried about Joe. I thought he was having a stroke. This is a woman who misses the spotlight and the trappings of power. And Hunter Biden goes without saying. The Bidens are hicks. They're straight up hicks. They're very similar to the Clintons, I've always maintained. These are people that aren't necessarily anti-country. They don't necessarily want to do harm to the fundamental building blocks of the republic as much as they want to enrich themselves. They're grifters. They're hillbillies. They're like, people that go to the buffet and stuff their pockets full of the bread, then take it home. That's who the Bidens are, I believe. And so when it came time for them to step aside after their duty of filling the one term post-Trump so they can install Kamala, he said, I don't want to leave. And Jill said, we're not leaving. And so they said, okay, we're going to do a debate and we're going to push it up early, Joe. If that's your decision, I think we ought to take Trump on right now. I don't think he wants to debate. I think he's afraid of you. And Joe, buying it, elder abuse, he was a victim of at this point. Yeah, okay, I'll do it. Let's take him on. They marched him out there on purpose to embarrass himself. And once he did exactly what they knew he'd do, embarrass himself, that gave them enough time, not a lot, but enough time to do the old switcheroo. And so that's just a walk back in history, not too distant history, to remind you where we've been. And so when you hear a guy like Chris Murphy say, oh, Biden should have dropped out earlier, it was a mistake for him to stay in the race. Right. They knew. They knew who they wanted. And, of course, Nancy Pelosi ended up becoming the ultimate Judas to her old buddy Joe. She's the one that ultimately slit his proverbial political throat and forced him out. And then they issued that bizarre letter with what I would have sworn was either an auto pen signature, like he apparently issued a letter from his Delaware home, wishing Kamala Harris well, and it was signed. Like I was imagining him tied up in the basement like Misery or something. Yeah, so it's difficult for me. It will always be difficult for me to ever talk about the Joe Biden presidency as legitimate. I don't believe that it ever was. I think most of us know that it wasn't. And we dodged a real bullet. There's just no other way to say it. I talked to somebody yesterday who said the country was lost. If Democrats had figured out somehow to get her across the finish line, and they couldn't do it with over $1 billion. There's never been that kind of money spent and lost on a presidential campaign ever. They couldn't get it done. That's how bad she was. But had they gotten her over the finish line and been successful, I don't know if I'd be sitting here. And I'm kind of sincere about that because I'm not sure what the state of the First Amendment would be. You saw what Democrats did yesterday in California, didn't you? The Stop Nick Shirley Act. California Assembly Bill 2024, dubbed by critics the Stop Nick Shirley Act, passed the California Assembly, raising concerns among opponents that undercover journalism and fraud investigations could be restricted, including investigations conducted by independent journalists like Nick Shirley. Of course, this law would restrict them. Shirley, who you now know, has uncovered hundreds of millions of dollars of daycare fraud in Minnesota and hospice fraud in California. According to the bill's text, this bill would, quote, prohibit a person from posting on the internet the personal information or image of a designated immigration support services provider, employee, or volunteer, or other individuals residing at the same home address. This would be done through California's existing Safe at Home program, which provides substitute mailing addresses for individuals concerned about their safety. The program currently includes protections for, quote, victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, and on and on. Supporters of the bill argue it's intended to protect immigration service providers by adding them to the list of protected individuals. Republican Assembly member Carl DeMaio, a vocal opponent, argues the legislation has consequences for journalists trying to uncover fraud in California. And here's what he says. If you show up and take video of those providers under this bill, all they have to do is hand a business card over to the investigative journalist. And if they posted that evidence that they caught on video on the internet, they would be violating the law. The lawyers in this room know that. Absolutely, under this language, it would be prohibited from being posted on the internet. It's outrageous. When you vote for this, that is what you're voting to do. That's right. This is just another version of big tech colluding with the Biden administration to keep the Hunter Biden laptop a secret from you and me. Or when any of us wanted to post anything about COVID on YouTube, the YouTube platform for the longest time. I mean, I would try to launch a YouTube channel during the COVID era, and every time I would, I'd launch it and it'd be taken down. I'd have another strike. There was a period of time on social media, and it's why I frankly fear a Democrat regime ever again. Those of you who get your information and news and you prefer watching shows like this, and you go to townhall.com and you watch friends like my colleague Larry O'Connor, these shows and this format, people watching on YouTube TV and all of the ways we're now getting information that's not traditional broadcast media, enjoy it and protect it and fight like hell to protect it, because if Democrats take control, they have pledged. This is the kind of stuff they're going to do. They will quite literally, along with their big tech allies, they will keep you from seeing or hearing any commentary, any investigative journalism, any comments challenging the status quo, challenging fraud, challenging the medical establishment. We've seen it. We've lived it. And again, it's not too distant history. And so this is why I say the Republic, if Kamala Harris had been successful, this kind of stuff, it would be a national epidemic. In Maryland, speaking of the First Amendment, how about the Second? Let's just move down the amendments one at a time. Hours after Wes Moore, the Democrat governor in Maryland, signed legislation that could ban the sale of Glock pistols, pro-Second Amendment organizations announced they would file suit to block the law. Moore became the second governor to enact a ban on so-called machine gun convertible pistols. Now, I loved the quotes in this story from those who are in opposition to this. With a single stroke of his pen, Wes Moore has banned one of the most popular handguns in America. These pistols are among the most popular on the market, chosen in overwhelming number by peaceable citizens for lawful purposes like self-defense. Maryland has now attempted to ban these firearms because a subset of criminals illegally modifies them using conversion parts that are themselves illegal to possess and then commit crimes with modified handguns. And here's my favorite part of this. Not only is the law as foolish as banning hops and barley to prevent drunk driving, these commonly owned arms are clearly protected by the Second Amendment, the ratification of which takes certain policy choices, including this one, off the table. Bingo, precisely right. That is one of the attorneys on the case in opposition to Maryland's new signed law, trying to ban the gun, take legal firearms out of the legal hands of a legally firearms possessing American citizen, because criminals who possess instruments to alter the use of that gun. They have those in their possession illegally to begin with. Most crime committed with guns is committed by people who don't legally possess the gun to begin with. Everybody knows that. So rather than stiffen the penalties for people and enforcing the laws for people who are illegally developing these firearms, using these parts they illegally obtain, they're going after the gun itself. And I love that quote. That's like trying to stop drunk driving by banning hops and barley. It's absurd. This is who Democrats are. And as you've heard the famous quote, the Second Amendment was developed to protect the First. That's why they're in that order. I always liked that. Whether that's actually historically true or not, I don't know, but I love the concept. Your right to speak freely, the right of journalists to do journalism, the right of worshipers to gather and worship. The Democrats have stormed into worship services this year and disrupted them over immigration policy. Democrats in California are trying to stop investigative journalism. Democrats in Maryland are trying to stop you from legally obtaining a Glock. This is who they are. They're after kids. We know that too. The so-called gender-affirming care industry is in retreat across much of the country as courts uphold bans on medicalized gender transitions for minors and shield counselors from compelled affirmation of gender confusion. The lucrative field of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgical interventions, a routine next step for children whose gender confusion is affirmed via social transitions, like using opposite-sex pronouns in school. Also facing crippling jury awards, as evidenced by a $2 million medical malpractice payout in New York for a detransitioner. Practitioners getting mixed signals in recent weeks on their proposals going forward, with gender-affirming providers in Oregon coming to terms with an adult detransitioner. But anyway, California, very specifically, and Kansas, too, for that matter, some judges are trying to block the efforts of these federal executive orders and actions and some state executive orders and actions to leave minor children alone. Stop mentally manipulating and physically manipulating minor children. And if you do, you will lose all federal funding. And frankly, I think you should be jailed. And there are judges, and you will see this in places like Kansas, lawmakers, California, and some, I guess, in Kansas. But you will also see now in California, legislators trying to pass laws that say teachers can keep gender transitioning secret from kids and parents. So if a student comes to a teacher in a California school, their legislature believed it was totally lawful to keep that a secret from the parents. And teachers in many cases were even helping kids go shopping for clothes, pronoun and name changes and things like that, and keeping it secret. In some cases, physically taking them on shopping trips or keeping them in their home in one famous case in the last year. Again, this is who Democrats are. It bears repeating. And so when President Trump says, look, I don't care about the midterms, I think he's betting on the fact that Democrats are so mentally deranged, so broken, so out of whack, and that he's charting the right course in global history and dealing with places like China and Iran. I think, well, and I can't help but think he's probably thinking I've dodged 3 assassination attempts too while I'm at it. If something's not on my side by now, I'm going to just keep playing this hand I've been dealt. I really do. I think President Trump in his own way believes that he is on a mission that he sees clearly. And I think he believes the Democrats, and I think he correctly believes the Democrats are so broken and so whacked out, they're not a legitimate alternative. Now, that's not singing the praises again of the Republican Party. It's not enough for Republicans to simply say, well, the Democrats are so crazy, you have no choice. I don't agree with that. That is not to excuse the Republicans from not being helpful to the Trump agenda, not even a little bit, just to be clear. People like Mike Pence, for instance, who have resurfaced. I don't know why, but the former vice president is back. It's interesting. I just, all the old tired stuff comes back again. Here we are coming into an election cycle, and so we bring back stuff like virus talk. We already talked about the hantavirus a couple of weeks ago. Ebola, and Mike Pence. Sorry to put Mike Pence and Ebola in the same sentence, but you get it. It's the same old stuff. It's like you see it coming down the tracks now. They roll out all the old stuff to see if they can't derail and hobble Donald Trump. Thankfully, most of us are too smart for that by now. Here's Mike Pence, again, like Joe Biden, anybody asked for, making comment on whatever. Go ahead.
Policy and personality. I mean, look, I can say that your ideas are really bad. And they might be. I don't know you, but you might have really bad ideas. Without saying you're a bad person, right? I mean, I think negative personal attacks have no place in public life. And the American people want us to get back to arguing about policy.
I don't exactly know what the vice president's angle is there. I don't know, if he means Donald Trump and the comments he makes or what. I don't know who that's directed at. But I think we've gotten to a place where calling sin is now viewed by people like Mike Pence as a personal attack. And, if you're a Christian, Mr. Vice President, and he says that he is, and I believe that he is, I think he's an inherently decent family guy. I don't think he's like a scandal plagued guy or anything. I think he's kind of a squishy guy, as a lot of moderate Republican types, the John Cornyn types who just got shellacked. I think politically they're seen as weak, and Donald Trump is seen as a fighter. Does that mean you have to call people names? No, but you do have to call people out. And when you try to stifle the First Amendment, when you try to stifle the Second Amendment, when you try to take advantage of young people and transition them and convince them that kids were born mistakes, God made a mistake, and that maybe you're not the gender you're supposed to be, what do you call that? Okay, so Mike Pence says, I don't want to get into personal attacks. I can just say your ideas are mistaken. Well, I don't know. God has granted us natural rights, the Bill of Rights, codified by our founders, a gift from God. We believe that. God has bestowed on us certain unalienable rights. And if there are Democrat legislators, governors, whoever they may be, that want to infringe upon those, if there are people that want to take advantage of young minor children, what do you call them? Okay, so you don't want to be personal. You say, well, that's a bad idea. Or Mamdani, who wants to just seize property and hand it over to the government or hand it over to the mob, just seize it. What do you call that, Mr. Vice President? You're not comfortable with personal attacks, so we're just supposed to say that's a bad idea? Or do you fight like hell? Guess what? The American public, 77 million of them, said, fight like hell. Donald Trump, you're the man. You're next to the plate. And people that will not stand with Donald Trump in that fight, they're finding out quickly the Mike Pence strategy of just politely disagreeing ain't cutting it anymore. People are tired of polite disagreement because these people aren't polite. They're not politely disagreeing. They're quite literally trying to shred God's gifts bestowed on man. I don't know what you call that. Biblically speaking, it's pretty dark. Speaking of the Bible, Beto with a Bible. Well, one more. Let me give you one more. Here's another Democrat, the mayor of Chicago, Johnson, who says these teen takeovers, they're having crime problems in the streets. What's his solution? Here again, just listen to them. This is what Democrats want to do. Rather than enforce the laws and tackle crime, it's speech. It's a vehicle like social media that might need to be curtailed. Just listen to them.
We prevent the vast majority of these from ever taking place. There is an effort in city council to hold these social media apparatuses accountable. I believe that we should continue to explore that, and I'm going to continue to work with Alderman Hall around that. It's why we're actually taxing these big tech companies for the role that they have played in harming the mental health and well-being of our young people.
Yeah, social media, you see. Social media is the target, says the mayor. Now, look, we can have a healthy debate about youth and social media, but the idea that social media is responsible for young people gathering and breaking the law in Chicago, it's a laugh. Seattle's mayor, we talked about fraud off the top of the show today. Here's Katie Wilson. She says, I'm not following up on fraud. I'm just going to ignore the theft of taxpayer dollars. I don't intend to enforce the law. These Democrats are literally saying the laws, duly passed laws, just won't be enforced. We're going to turn our head or go after speech or some such thing. Just listen to them.
What have you done in those regards?
Yeah, so we're working on that. So we have conversations going on with the departments. And yeah, it's just, I don't think it needs to be explained why it's problematic to have random people showing up to daycares. I think the fear in the Somali community is real. The fear in immigrant communities are real. So we're taking that very seriously.
Along those lines, have you asked anyone to follow up on the fraud claims, either to the Department of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs or SPD?
No.
So there's, as far as you're concerned right now, there's no reason to suggest there's any sort of fraud.
This whole issue is not really about fraud, right? It's about dividing and conquering. It's about making an immigrant community a target, right? There's no reason to assume based on the identity of a daycare operator that their small business is doing anything wrong.
By the way, Aaron, I don't know if you have the ability to pull it up, but I was just looking at Mayor Katie Wilson. I don't know that I've ever seen Seattle's Mayor Katie Wilson, who again pledges we're not going to deal with fraud. We're not even going to entertain it. I don't know if you have the ability to pull up the classic old portrait, the painting, American Gothic. You may not be able to do that, but if we don't have access to the old painting called American Gothic, that's okay. I would encourage viewers to go look up American Gothic, the painting, and tell me that the woman in that painting, Aaron, doesn't look exactly like them. There it is. There's American Gothic. Tell me that doesn't look exactly like the mayor of Seattle, that woman. What do you think, Aaron? Am I close?
Uncanny.
I think that's Seattle's mayor, Katie Wilson. I really do. Holy cow. Woof, what a handsome woman, huh? How old do you think she is? Sorry, I'm going to get accused of being sexist. I'm just curious.
The mayor?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't. All she needs is one of those silhouette brooches there, and a husband with a pitchfork. There she is, the mayor of Seattle, Katie Wilson. Wow. Anyway, let's get to James Talarico now. He's taking some unusually tough questions from unusually tough sources. Now that they are claiming, and Axios is so hopeful, The Hill is so hopeful, Cook Political Report is so hopeful, all the regulars are out there telling us now that because Ken Paxton is the damaged goods of the Republican brand, there is no chance that he's going to beat this saintly preacher from Texas. The Democrats have finally got their candidate in Texas, James Talarico. He's going to be the one to topple Ken Paxton because Ken Paxton is so flawed, and they're all saying the same thing. And they want so much for Talarico to be the guy. Do you understand? This is their great white whale. Nothing is more important to Democrats than winning Texas, and they have blown billions of dollars. Remember, Kamala Harris went to Texas with Beyonce. Remember that? They poured that $1 billion she blew. A lot of it was in Texas. They were convinced she could win Texas. That's how cocky they were. That's how much money they had. And they have blown billions of dollars on multiple cycles on Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz before this. Now they think Talarico's the guy to get it done. Cook Political Report, the nonpartisan election handicapper, Cook Political Report, shifted its rating of the Texas Senate race toward the Democrats from likely Republican to lean Republican after Ken Paxton defeated John Cornyn. So you'll be sold this for a while. James Talarico, he's coming on. I don't think Ken Paxton can beat him. Well, the Democrats know there's a problem with Talarico, and that's the fact that there's a whole lot of documented stuff, crazy stuff that he said from the pulpit and his time in the legislature, and I think before that, maybe city council or something like that. He's held previous offices. So there's lots of public statements he's made about a lot of different things. And the Democrats know how costly particularly this trans issue has been for the Democrat Party. So they're trying to get out of the way. To their credit right now, the Democrats are like, look, dude, we're banking on you. We want to win Texas. We're told you're the guy. So let's try to run through this. Let's do some dress rehearsal right now. When Paxton has you on stage and you start getting hammered with questions about your transgender ideology, that there are multiple genders and that Jesus was trans and doesn't have an opinion on abortion, that's all bonkers. We all know it. We're with you, but we got to work out an answer here. So he does the media tour over the last couple of days, the last 24, 48 hours, and gets these tough questions and doesn't do very well. Again, these are with friends. These are with people that want him to win. Let's start with 161.
Over Davy Crockett, there's a new Texas trailblazer in town, and their name is James Talarico, the man who bragged, "Our office is the first in the history of Texas to add pronouns to our official business cards."
I am running around like a crazy person today,
spreading his white skin wherever he goes.
I am not a perfect Christian. Prophetic voices like Jesus have helped me reckon with my own whiteness, my own masculinity, and it's a painful process.
Bearing the cross of white skin and unambiguous masculinity.
I was a big nerd in high school. I never played sports. I probably shouldn't out myself like this. Sex is a spectrum, and oftentimes it can be very ambiguous. God is both masculine and feminine and everything in between. God is non-binary.
Straight from Revelations in the woke James Bible.
I want us all to be aware of that. There are many more than two biological sexes. In fact, there are 6.
And on the 7th day, they rested. But not James Talarico. He built an ark big enough for all creatures.
To be able to write legislation that benefits not just the people, but also our animal friends.
Just like the Supreme Court said, 1 cow, 1 vote.
Now, existential, that we try to reduce our meat consumption. That's the right thing to do and the moral thing to do.
The 11th commandment. Thou shalt not smoke brisket.
I am proud to say that our campaign has officially become a non-meat campaign.
So step aside, Sam Houston. Talarico's bravery towers over Texas. He's fighting for all 6 genders and tens of thousands of species.
I guess we just have a different moral yardstick.
You know what insults Jesus?
Binary white people who eat barbecue and remember the Alamo?
There's only been one perfect Christian.
And they certainly weren't a carnivorous, Caucasian, binary Homo sapien, according to the woke gospel of James.
They're going to call me a radical leftist, un-Texan, un-American.
And bar none, the weirdest candidate for Senate the Lone Star State has ever seen.
So that was just a refresher first. I didn't mean to play that, but I think we should go ahead and play that first. I'm glad we did. Thank you, Aaron, because that is stitched together all of the crazy bonkers things that have been on public record that he's said before. That ad was masterfully done, by the way, and very, very effective. And so on all of those things, they realize, the Democrats do, Republicans are coming for him. And he's supposed to be their perfect candidate. And they know how bad it looks. That's why I'm going to eat my hat, by the way. If Texas goes for this guy, look, if Texas elects that, there are bigger problems than just basic politics in this country. I'll just say that. I'm not a better Aaron, given that ad, and I think it's pretty damn effective. Would you play Polymarket right now? I haven't looked at Polymarket. I wonder if Polymarket has Paxton up over Talarico. I should sure hope so. People who bet their actual money, I would have to think Paxton is going to take Talarico. I have to believe that's where betting money is, right? Maybe not. Anyway, here's Talarico answering for this on CBS News yesterday.
So they're running a handful of highlights of things you've said in the past, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond or clarify. In 2021, in a speech during debate over transgender issues, you said God is non-binary. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think I was being intentionally provocative with that statement. But what it means is that God can't be defined by human categories. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, says that in Christ there is neither male nor female. I'm always going to stand up for Texans who are being picked on by the most powerful, most corrupt politicians in the country. And I'm going to continue doing that in this race and hopefully in the U.S. Senate.
You call it intentionally provocative. You regret describing it that way or talking about God that way?
There are some statements that I've made that I certainly regret. There are statements that I've made where I've missed the mark. I'll be the first to admit that. But Ken Paxton is intentionally clipping my cringy comments to distract from his career of corruption.
Ken Paxton has a criminal record. I have a legislative record. I've served for 4 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, where I brought Democrats and independents together to actually make progress for people. I've brought Republican legislators and Democratic legislators together to cut property taxes, to raise teacher pay, to lower the cost of housing and childcare and prescription drugs. I've passed more than 60 bipartisan bills as a legislator. I've also called out the extremes in both parties, on the left and the right. I have called out Ken Paxton for his blatant corruption, but I also called out President Biden for failing to secure our southern border. So,
and I want to get to the border in a second. Let me run one more by you, because again, the president, other Republicans are already bringing it up. Again, in 2021, though, while debating a bill that restricted transgender student athletes, you said modern science acknowledges 6 biological variations based on chromosomes to argue that sex is a nuanced spectrum, not a strict binary. Do you still believe there are 6 biological sexes?
I know there are 2 sexes, men and women. I also know there's a very small percentage of people who have these chromosomal abnormalities, and I believe they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
The other one they keep harping on, and it's perhaps the most curious of all, they say you're a vegan.
I'm not a vegan. I'm an 8th generation Texan. I've been eating barbecue since before Ken Paxton's first indictment. And this campaign basically runs on Texas barbecue. If all they have is lying about me being a vegan, I feel pretty good about our chances this November.
Yeah, and as of now, Poly Market has a Republican victory 60-40 there. So people are putting their money on Republican victory, regardless of it being Paxton or Talarico anyway, and I suspect it's only going to get worse. No, that is not all they have on you, Mr. Talarico, that you're a vegan. That's far from it, actually. And again, your perversion of Scripture is grotesque, and every Christian knows it too. So I don't bet, I don't gamble, but if I'm going to put money down, I would absolutely put my money down on Paxton winning, just by virtue of this guy being such a lunatic. So that'll do it for us today, folks. I appreciate you being here, as always, from America's Heartland. You know, we're going to do this again tomorrow, and I hope you'll be here. Be sure and stay close to us by subscribing to the Heartlander News channel here on YouTube for every new show that we publish. And make sure you give us a like. I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section, too. Glad to have you along here, and we will see you next time on Heartlander News.